Hello! It's so great to see you guys. Today we're going to be talking about the Tang Dynasty of China. So, let's begin. So the Tang Dynasty is going to be following the fall of the Sui Dynasty. We know that they wound up going and not being the best rulers of China. They did a lot of good. However, remember, they overworked the people. They wound up letting people starve while they lived in luxury and feasted along the Grand Canal. We're going to see the Tang Dynasty is going to reap the benefits of the work of the Sui as they gain the mandate of heaven. So, Li Wang is going to be the man who leads the rebellion against the Sui Dynasty, and he is going to wind up going and declaring himself Emperor of China. Now, think about this. The people were in poverty. They hadn't had anything, so the way he wins the people over is he gives the farmers additional land so that they can grow more crops, so then we don't have the situation where they're starving while the royals are feasting. So, they do another thing. They saw the problem of the Han Dynasty. Remember, the Han had a very large bureaucracy, but particularly near the end in the later Han and in the Eastern Han period, we have the rich going and purchasing their positions, like the chief of police bribing the emperor so that he can become the chief of police, and then therefore he goes and makes sure his friends don't follow any of the laws and they're fine, but then his enemies are arrested and taken away even though they've done nothing wrong. People like in positions of protecting the Silk Road, they just take the payments from there. They don't pay their soldiers. The soldiers don't go, and then the Silk Road isn't protected. So the Tang don't want to repeat this mistake. So what they do is they create civil service exams. Civil service, of course, would be working for the government, serving the civilians. That's where you get it from. And then examinations is just a fancy word for test. And the whole point of this test was to make sure people were qualified to hold office. What does that word qualified mean? Well, look at it. We see the word quality. If we look at qualified, it means that they have the qualities to hold office. They have the abilities, the strengths to be able to have that position. Now, they didn't just go and ask, for example, for lawyers, just legal questions, or for doctors, being chief of medicine in China, medical questions. They asked about Chinese literature, poetry. All of them had legal and administrative issues. They wanted to have well-rounded and talented individuals in these government positions. Now, they wanted to have well-rounded, talented individuals, but they didn't want certain individuals to be part of the Tang bureaucracy. And part of this is due to prejudices against certain groups. So, merchants were considered some of the lowest of the low. When we start looking at Chinese social pyramids, we're going to wind up seeing that merchants were considered very poor because of Confucianism. We discussed Confucianism last year. And in Confucianism, merchants were thought of lowly because they didn't create. They made money off of other people's work. Therefore, they were considered lower than peasants in social standing, even though they were typically wealthier. Now, another group that did not receive respect were the actors and actresses. Just like when we talked about the Byzantine Empire, the idea that these people were for the entertainment of others meant they didn't receive the respect as other groups. Finally, the poor were not allowed to take the exams, those that did not have any wealth whatsoever. So although the civil service exams under the Tang Dynasty were designed to have the best workers in the government, they did discriminate against some. part of the reasons why the poor couldn't possibly take these tests, well, to take a test you have to study. You have to know the material. If you're a poor farmer, you're not going to be able to take the time off of farming to study. Your family might starve. You're not going to be able to afford the books. In fact, you probably don't even know how to read. Lastly, another thing that you wouldn't be able to have is the ability to pay a tutor, someone to help you and give you additional resources and information on how to take the test. So therefore, although the civil service exams opened it up and tried to have the best people in government, many people were excluded. You had to be somewhat wealthy to be able to take these tests. By the way, the music is from the Tang period as well. One of my very favorites here. So, now we're going to be discussing Empress Wu. She was the first woman to rule China. Empress Wu Zetian is going to be often called the Heavenly Empress. You're going to do a reading about her, and she is just absolutely fascinating. Now, she's not depicted as a good ruler, though. She's depicted as power-hungry, cruel. But we know she was incredibly intelligent and that she was a good ruler. In fact, she was going to bring stability and wealth, prosperity to China in a time when China was hurting. Now, let's look at this, though. In this period of rule, we have Chinese women not being treated well. A female child was considered less desirable than a male child. Sometimes, because they wanted sons, they would even kill a female infant if there wasn't enough food to go around. And when a girl was to get married, her family had to pay the husband to have her. Isn't that crazy? So, Empress Wu, despite this, she manages to go and marry the emperor. The emperor then becomes very sick. In his stead, she rules for him. When he dies, she then rules in the name of her son, who was too young. She chose people based on their abilities. She wound up going and increasing trade. However, she doesn't want to give up power. They say she had secret police. Now, we have to take many of these things that they say about her being power hungry, her not being kind or virtuous, with a grain of salt, because historians often go and bash female leaders, as we know, long after the fact. So, when you do your reading on her, you're going to need to make some decisions. Do you think the historians are being truthful, honest, or is Empress Wu a greater ruler than we thought? Continuing on with our Tang Dynasty. Now, the Tang are going to retake the Silk Road. They're going to wind up having guards to protect it and make it so the trade can be vibrant once again. We're going to see during this time a lot of cultural diffusion, things coming from the west to the east, things like rubies, pearls, glass that they got from Rome, wind up going and becoming very popular with the Chinese. New foods are going to come to China. Chairs. Now, this seems like such a silly thing to say that chairs became a symbol for wealth. But if your tables are all designed for you to be sitting on a little pillow on the ground, and you start bringing in chairs, and then you need taller tables. So when you would go into an aristocrat's house and you saw, oh, look at this, they have chairs, how fancy. They've had to change a lot of things to accommodate that, and therefore show that they had a lot of wealth. Buddhism is going to remain very popular in China during the beginning of our Tang Dynasty. And because of the popularity of Buddhism, in fact, the governments are going to wind up going and not taxing them. The monasteries are going to accumulate a lot of wealth. But people started looking at that and saying, Buddhism isn't Chinese, it's from India. Why are the Chinese, the oldest and greatest empire, why are they going and listening to a foreign religion? And because of this, the government is going to see an opportunity where they see these wealthy Buddhist temples and monasteries, and they wind up going and taking their land, taking their wealth, so that they're then able to go and accrue more for themselves. So we're going to see Buddhism is going to become a victim of xenophobia. Xenophobia, of course, is fear of the outsider. We're going to see China start turning in halfway through the Tang period. Here's just showing the Tang territory. We see that we have this narrow strip connecting the western provinces. Remember, they're crossing through deserts and mountains to be able to go and see up here. So that's why it's so strangely shaped. Here's just some examples of Chinese clothing, which I thought some of you might be interested in how it evolved through time. So, that is going to actually wind up being our notes for the day. I hope you have a wonderful day. I miss you guys. Hope you're doing well. See you later.